Hello there and welcome to this week's episode of AB+. This week we have questions on the 6th Commandment. We're getting through them rightly and we'll be discussing those and then try and answer a couple of those questions for you at home. And just at the start, as always, I want to remind you that if you have any questions at all on any of the commandments that are upcoming, then please do send them to us on the mobile number that will be on the screen now. We would love to have as many questions as you can think of. This week we have two new guests, as you can see, two great men, and I'm just going to ask them now to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves.
Okay, my name's David Hanna. I'm actually a member of Rathfriland Presbyterian Church. I have been all my life. I'm actually probably two roles really in the church there. As I'm Boys Brigade captain and I'm also an elder. So in personal life, I'm married to Heather with two young children at age of 6 and 3. And during the daytime, I work in the food industry as for a company, and I work in the research and development. So that's just a little bit about myself.
And then our other guest.
I'm Alan Morrow. I'm a member of Sandy Street First Newry Presbyterian Church. I got to know Mark through the summer outreach team, and followed his career with interest since then. I'm a lifelong member of Sandy Street Church, and I'm not going to tell you how many years that is. I'll leave you to guess. I've been an elder since 1972, and taught a bit in the Bible class and Sunday school since then.
Very good. Well, thank you, David. Thank you, Alan, for coming along and agreeing to have a wee discussion tonight. Just before we come to our questions, then I'm going to read the 6th Commandment as it is, and then go and read a few other passages from Scripture that will hopefully help us to answer some of these questions and put into perspective this commandment. So the 6th Commandment is found in Exodus 20 and verse 13, and it reads very simply, "You shall not murder," or as some different versions would put it, "You shall not kill." Then if we move on to Matthew 5, verses 21 to 26, it reads like this. "You have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not murder,' and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says 'you fool' will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering a gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny." Then a few pages over to Matthew chapter 10, verse 28. "And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell." Then on to Romans. Romans chapter 12. I haven't got marked here, I thought I did. I'll do. Romans chapter 12 and verse 19. "Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord.'" And then our final reading, final passage from 1 John chapter 3, and first of all verse 12 and then verse 15. "We should not be like Cain, who was of the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil and his brother's righteous." And then verse 15. "Everyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him." So with all those passages in mind, then we'll come to our first question, and we'll have quite a few. Well, they're different type of question this week. They're quite ethical in the question. So, question one is this: if someone is terminally ill, can we assist them in dying, or is that murder? Is euthanasia not merciful and compassionate? So if someone is terminally ill, can we assist them in dying? Does that break the 6th Commandment?
I think they're just maybe I'll just kick off here, put myself in the spotlight first on the very start there. So just I think in one sense you could say it is merciful and compassionate if you took it at face value. But then the other aspect of it is that all human life belongs to God, and it's not our our own really. And it's up to, you know, it's he decides when our life will end. So we have to remember that. I think the other thing about euthanasia is, you know, it's not just, you're not just considering us like an animal or a pet. You know, something of an animal or a pet would be sick or maybe has been injured there. You would put it to sleep there, and that would be the end there. But with us, a death is obviously not the end. And you know, if you put the other aspect, and that is if you did carry out the euthanasia on a person, you might not actually be doing them a favor here, because what happens if that person is not prepared for death and what happens after that? So you could actually be propelling that person to an existence that's unprepared for. So that's probably the first sort of thoughts there. And then I think the other aspect there is you know, if someone who is terminally ill there, that leads me into thinking of the hospice movement and the great care and the fantastic work that the hospice does, and their work is really around their great dignity and ease of suffering there. And you know, that's the better way. That's the better way of actually dealing with that. So with euthanasia.
Yeah, I think even as Christians, when we're debating this in our mind, we'll have to think, you know, or I suppose what the debate is in people's minds is that we want to preserve life, but we also don't want to prolong death, you know. And that's the problem, because we see those two things, you know. We see preserving life, we want to do that, that's a good thing. But when that life is at a certain standard, and it's, you know, somebody is bedridden or whatever, then we don't want to prolong that either. So, you know, that's maybe what's in people's mind when they think about this.
Yeah, well, just on that, Mark, we'd been doing the 5th Commandment last week about honour your father and mother, and in preparing for that, I was thinking about how the parents take care of the baby, and how then the baby grows up into adulthood, and then as the parents get older, it ends up that the child has become the adult, is starting to care for the needs of their older parent or parents. And the way God has made us is provided the family, and in other countries we have more generations under the one roof than do here, but there is a responsibility within us to care for our older parents or the elderly. So yes, you can look at babies and say they're helpless or they need their nappy changed, but you don't say, well, it'd be simpler to euthanize them and get rid of them. So likewise, just because an elderly parent needs help and assistance, you just can't turn around and say, well, they've lived their life, it's over, we'll euthanize them just because it's convenient. So we have to, I think, in all of the argument, we have to come back to the point that we are made in the image of God to worship God, and that life is sacred.
Yeah, I think even with that, a few Bible passages that came to mind, and that it was looking at was, 1 Corinthians 15, we're told that death is an enemy. It was not something we should be welcoming. In that sense, as you say, Trevor, life is a sacred gift from God. It says that in Genesis 2. In Deuteronomy 30, God tells Israel to choose life. So we have all these things in front of us, and I suppose that helps us for the rest of the questions as well. But that tells us how sacred life is. And also I read a bit of a quote, and it went along the line. I can't remember exactly, but it went along the lines of, God has the final say over death. He is sovereign, and euthanasia is really a means, or man's attempt to usurp that authority from God. What about treatment? Because we have end-of-life treatment. If people have a very serious illness, they will be offered treatment. And quite often we will hear of people that maybe have turned down that treatment, whether they think they want to die with dignity or they don't want to prolong the end of their days or whatever. What would your thoughts on that be? Is it different, or should we have the same kind of attitude towards that as we do euthanasia or mercy killing, as it's called?
Well, just a wee bit from family experience. I think we all want to live it a day longer, and medicine offers us assistance. And yes, we have a choice in that. But I also think that the medical professionals, in offering that care, they know as well how much the body can take. They can see for themselves when the body is starting to close down, and that you don't keep pushing care to it. So I think there's not only may the patient think they have a choice, but I think also medicine can see when the body is coming to its end, or life is coming to its end.
Well, maybe move on to question 2 at the minute. This is a big issue at the moment in the world. We'll hear an awful lot about it. Question 2 is, if a woman is pregnant and the child is expected to be handicapped in some way, is it not better to allow for an abortion? And then more generally, is abortion a violation of the 6th Commandment? And just before we answer that, I read last week that over the course of last year, worldwide, there was recorded, I think it was either 72 or 75 million abortions. So this is something that's not small scale. It's not just something that affects our wee country in Northern Ireland. It's a worldwide thing, and millions and millions of aborted babies every year. So is abortion a violation of the 6th Commandment?
And the clerk of Presbytery, my own minister, who's the moderator of Presbytery, and the clerk of Presbytery, had a page in the newsletter today, which is well worth reading. But I think when you consider the first few verses of Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Yeah. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Now, if God had Jeremiah's life planned out before he was born, did he not have my life planned out before I was born? Now, he didn't create me a zombie. He created me with the free will to fulfill his will or not to fulfill his will. But people are created for a purpose, even handicapped people.
Yeah.
And a lot of handicapped people give an awful lot of love and fulfillment to their families. The other thing, if you don't mind me going on a wee bit, is at what age does a fetus become a person? And who's qualified to decide that? Is it a month before birth, or a week before birth, or the day before birth, or an hour before birth? Is the House of Commons qualified to decide And am I qualified to decide? And is any mother qualified to decide?
Created in the image of God for his purpose and his plan. And one theologian has actually said that a person may not be killed because that person has actually or potentially is the ability to praise and to worship God. And if we end up killing and murdering an infant, an adult, then we're taking away worship from God. So we're unlawfully robbing God, and we're breaking that commandment, thou shalt not steal. So we should be opposed to abortion. And sadly, as you mentioned earlier, whenever it comes to why do we need to discuss abortion, what are the reasons behind it? People have made it a social issue rather than a life and death issue. And they, sadly, as Alan's pointing out there, the Reverend Key and the Reverend Finlay, because of abortions taking place in their presbytery in Uri, have had to highlight to us the need to stand up for the unborn child and the sanctity of life. And we are clear that it is wrong to murder babies in the womb, and life starts from the moment of conception. So we as Christians and as Bible obeying people should stand against killing and the ending of life in the womb.
As you say there, another quote that I actually read this week said, I think it ties in well with what you're saying there. It said, for the Christian, abortion is not a matter of a woman's right to choose, but it is a matter of the life or death of a human being being made in God's image.
Yeah.
So I think that perfectly describes what you're saying there. But I was going to say there in Exodus 21 as well, if we read Exodus 21 chapter or verse 22 to 25, then we actually see that if a pregnant woman is hit and her baby is killed or hurt, then you actually have the same penalty prescribed for that as you do for someone who commits murder. So, after following the commandments in the next chapter, if you have the same penalty for something like that, it's the same thing. It's killing. It's causing the death of another person.
Yeah, those who are pro-abortion will argue that you can't say it's murder, because if it was murder, then people would be jailed. But our laws have been changed to allow abortion to be legal, sadly. So that's where you'll have a bit of conflict on the terminology, whether it's murder or not.
It's definitely a very big issue. But we'll move on just for now. And the third question, is capital punishment biblical? I think I'm going to let a more experienced man answer this one. This is one it's a hard question. Maybe answering to define, is capital punishment biblical?
Previous two questions were probably quite clear cut in many ways. This one's, you've got, I think there's a different views on this one. I think it's just not as quite clear. I think I'm going to have a stab at it. Hopefully you can keep me in the right direction here, Trevor. But I think, when you look back at the Old Testament, what is there? Is there over 30 points actually in terms of capital punishment for various reasons there. So yeah, you can take that at face value and think that capital punishment. Yes, that's right, and it is very much could be a deterrent in many ways for many crimes. But then I think then when I look at the New Testament, and then particularly with Christ's example there of the woman caught in adultery there, and she was forgiven. So I think there Christ's emphasis on forgiveness there it would overpower that. So I think that's just some points to bring on. I think once one person actually has been punished by capital punishment, really there's no chance to repent and forgive and that forgiveness and then turn around their life after that. So so yeah, once they're gone, it's very, very final there. There's no chance actually to change their life and make amends.
And yet, capital punishment, when it's properly administered by the government, it is a lawful form of law and order. And you can keep me right as well, David, because you're more the historian. But I think the last person to be hanged in Northern Ireland actually was from Rathfriland or thereabouts. So the point, biblically, capital punishment is permissible. The challenge and responsibility then is for those in authority to administer that with the proper responsibility and not to abuse it.
We'll go on to the next question. Then question 4: is taking life in self-defense or killing for your country at risk of breaking the 6th Commandment?
There was a lot of talk during the Troubles about a shoot-to-kill policy. No soldier or policeman is taught to shoot to wound. They're all taught to shoot to kill. Nobody shoots to wound. Only the Wild West heroes did that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that when you're confronted with an armed person and you're in that position, you're making a split-second decision, kill or be killed. And inevitably there's going to be mistakes in that context. Human nature being human nature. So there's a risk, yeah.
So what's the other definition there? You talk about kill and murder, and I think maybe Trevor, I think you brought that up on one of your talks there, the difference, but the technical difference between killing and when you're do not murder or do not kill. It's good to sort of bring that definition up there on that.
Yeah, if you said that it was wrong to kill, then the Jews wouldn't have been able to go and take the promised land. They wouldn't have been able to go and kill the animals. So the distinction between killing and murdering is a legal one, because all murder involves killing, but not all killings are considered to be murders. So murder is what we would use to describe unlawful killing.
Killing for a cause, for an ideology, is not perceived as murder. And killing is actually, murder is contempt for God, because you're murdering someone who is created in his own image.
Yes.
And there are very clear definitions in the Old Testament as to what is murder and what is not murder. An accidental death certainly wasn't murder. So, yeah.
But if you talk about terminology to do with murder as well, there's also the word genocide used by some people, and genocide seems to be regarded as the intentional killing of a group of people, and we still get that today whenever we talk about maybe a tribe or an ethnic minority within a bigger country. So that's another word that comes into this commandment as well.
We'll move on to our last question here, because I want to give it a bit of time, just because I'm sure there's experience with this in some way, shape or form, because all of us are I'm sure we'll have friends or family members that have maybe suffered with thoughts of this in the past. Question 5: how are we to best understand suicide from a biblical perspective, and even sort of just to add to that, what is that breaking the 6th commandment as well? Because it's not asked here, it's not in the question, but I think we can ask along with that: is suicide breaking the 6th commandment?
Well, as you say, Mark, many of us know people who've lost their life through suicide, and it's again, it's one of those difficult and sensitive aspects of life, and sadly it does happen. But in terms of scripture, I think we can say that suicide is self-murder, is the person murdering themselves. So that is wrong, because the 6th commandment encourages us to do all that is lawful to preserve our own life and the life of others. And again, it's like euthanasia. We're sitting on God's throne saying, we're going to end our own life now, rather than waiting until God decides that for us. So it's wrong because it's murder. It's wrong because we're stealing the sovereignty of God. So graciously, there are two reasons that it's wrong.
Yeah, and I think it's a difficult one too, because it's so very sad when people, obviously when they take their lives, but even when somebody is thinking of that, when they're in a place in their life with depression or anxiety or whatever it may be, maybe circumstances have caused them to feel this way. It's so very sad because they feel they're without hope.
Yeah.
And we know, of course, that we have a hope. And it's just, you have Christians as well that suffer from depression. It's not just people who don't know the Bible, who have not heard of Jesus, and who don't understand the meaning of life or whatever. It's actually Christians as well suffer with depression and anxiety. So maybe even to add to that question, how do you think we could best deal with all people, but specifically with Christians who have anxiety, depression, and have suicidal thoughts?
That a young boy or young girl doesn't see hope and doesn't see a future and a purpose. And pastorally, I struggle to how we encourage that person. We'll talk about fellowship, we'll talk about discipleship, mentoring, but there's obviously more to it, and the same is true of adults. I've had conversations with older folk, and it'd be very easy, like as we said last week, for the minister to get up and preach the Bible, which he has to do, and that's part of it. But there's obviously other professional help that is needed alongside that, and so it's not minimizing what an individual is going through, but it's a broader range of help and pastoral care as part of that.
Well, I don't have any first-hand experience of suicide, which I'm very thankful for. And the blunt answer is, of course, that God gives life and God decides when life ends.
Yeah,
that's the blunt answer. But
yeah,
it's when I hear of somebody who's committed suicide, and you think, what have they gone through before they went to that stage, and your heart goes out to them.
Yeah,
and it's all ages.
Mm-hmm.
And people who seem to have everything they want in the world, everything that you could reasonably want, and they end their own life, and they're obviously crying out for something.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sorry, I don't really have answers.
I think certainly it's a very sensitive subject, and that's obviously it's a subject that we can't really judge people too much on that. It's just very hard to know what goes through people's head, what's bring them to that point. but it does reiterate the fact that mental health is a very, very important thing, and it seems to be a very topical subject at the moment. Right across a lot of government strategies, a lot of local strategies, and things like that there, and certainly that's how we can get people to look after their thoughts and their that aspect of them, just as they're looking after their physical health, they look after their mental health, and being able to open up and talk about their problems and things like that. So I think there's a lot of good things out there, a lot of good programs out there which we as a church can incorporate into our offering and program, and certainly helping those needs.
So it's just so prevalent, especially as you're saying, with COVID at the minute, people are locked in their houses. You don't know what people are thinking. There's no social interaction, especially with young people who crave that, who need that. There's none of it there.
I think, those 18, 20-year-olds are certainly the age group, as I speak to them, and adults that are struggling with the lockdown scenario. I also, Psalm 139 talks about how we're knit together in the womb. And the more I have thought and read about this topic of mental well-being, God has created us, and it would appear that as he has created us, there are some people, our minds are created by God and given to us, but there are some people in life have more of a struggle with their mental thoughts being negative than other people who tend to think more positive thoughts, as well as all the mind is mighty complex. That's very simplistic, but there are some people, and in life that is part of their spiritual battle. Yeah,
and that, you can't say that man didn't know God and he wasn't a Christian. It's a fact that Christians will suffer from depression, and with that depression may come these kind of thoughts of suicide and taking one's own life.
We see in the likes of Spurgeon, there's part of a debate as well, as he went on in his ministry, growing older and meeting more people. Did his concern for the spirituality of people and the lostness of their souls, was that something else which fed into his sense of desperation, that he wasn't doing enough for God, and these people were going into a lost eternity? So you can have a mix of spiritual coming into the psychological.
Well, I think we're out of time. I'm not sure, but we can't be too far away from it. But just as we wrap up, obviously I want to say thank you to David and Alan for coming along, and Trevor as always. And again, remind each of you that at home that we will take questions no matter what they are on the next few commandments. Please do send them in to Trevor or myself. The phone number will be on the screen or posted with the video. So that's all for this evening. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you again next week. So bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.